Good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all to your first focused resident working group meeting. My name is Malini Sims, and I'm a principal planner for the town, and I will be facilitating tonight's discussion. First and foremost, though, we want to help get to know everyone and let you get to know each other. So I do ask that if possible, to please keep your camera on. We do ask that you stay muted just so we don't have background noise, but having your camera on will help all of us put names to faces, I think is the way that order goes. To start us off, though, we do want to go through introductions. And so I'm going to launch a quick poll to help us out with this. So you should see it coming up on your screen here in a moment. And if you would please take a moment to answer the poll. And there's no wrong answers. All right. Let me share the results. It looks like most folks enjoy the mountain views the most. Some also enjoy the wildlife as well as the native plants. So with that, if you chose mountain views, would you please raise your virtual hand? Okay, and I'll start going through. I'm going to call on your name, and if you'd please introduce yourself to the group. So let's start with Carolyn.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Weinig. I don't know what you want to know about me, but that's my name.
You can tell us maybe about how long you've lived in Oro Valley.
Okay. I'm a snowbird. I have been here 13 years and hope to be 13 more. I live on the Push Ridge Golf Course, so near the Hilton Resort. And I'm an active member of the Oro Valley Community Center. That's me.
Thank you, Caroline. Nice to meet you. Next is Sherry.
Hi, I'm Sherry Lomayesva. Sorry about my video. For some reason, it does not want to come on today, so I'll have to figure out what's going on there. I've been an Oro Valley resident since 1994. Both kids attended Iron Road Ridge and Wilson K-8, and I've been active in their school when they were in school. And yeah, so I've been here quite a while.
Great, thank you, Sherry. How about Nihar? Please correct my pronunciation.
Yeah, it's Nihar. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So my name is Nihar. I'm a junior here at Basis Oro Valley, and I got involved with all the Oro Valley Path Forward stuff through the Oro Valley Youth Advisory Council. And I've lived in Oro Valley since I was in fourth grade, I want to say. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for joining, Nihar. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela Reynolds. I was born and raised in Tucson, but I've been living in Oro Valley for, I think, the last 11 years.
Thank you, Angela. Rosa?
Hi, I'm Rosa Daly. I've been living in Oro Valley since 2006. I raised two girls here, and I love it.
Great. Thank you, Rosa. All right, that's all the Mountain View folks. So how about if you chose wildlife, if you'd like to raise your hand? Rachel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel. I moved to Oro Valley in 2021 with my husband from New York. And we have been getting to know the area and love it just so much. And my husband is a very active member of the Tucson Cactus and Succulent Society, rescuing native plants. And so when we moved into our house, the yard was almost bare, and now it is filled to the brim with cacti. So it has been really cool to get to know the wildlife and the plants in the area.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Keith, I think I saw you raise your hand. Yep. Oh, and yeah, we're not able to hear you, but looks like you're unmuted, Keith. I'll come back to you in a moment. Rose, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rose Piro. I'm a snowbird too, and I'm very active in some volunteer work in Colorado, which is where I snowbird from, and I've been here 5 years. And I'm happy to see the young folks that are on this committee too.
Great, thank you, Rose. All right, and I think the last one was saguaros or native plants. If you want to raise your hand, or I'll definitely get
Can
to
you
the
hear
folks.
me now?
We can, a little bit better, yes.
Is that good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. My name's Keith Lerman. I've lived in Oro Valley since 2016. I've lived in Tucson for the last 35 years or so. We live near Shannon and Lambert, and I'm big into wildlife, so that's why I chose wildlife.
Great, thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Andy, do you want to introduce yourself? And then you'll need to unmute, Andy.
Okay, yeah, I had to answer a couple questions first. Yeah, sorry, I missed the whole prompt or the setup, but my name's Andy Nowson. I live in Oro Valley, kind of near Naranja and La Cañada. Moved here in 2023 and retired right about the same time. I have a granddaughter here, that's why we moved here, but just love Oro Valley. It's so beautiful. And come from Oregon and just have a lot of concern about, the environment, the climate, interest in solar energy and keeping native species surviving.
All right.
Is that enough?
Yeah,
background?
great. And we'll definitely be talking about a lot of that this evening, so
Okay.
that's perfect. Mary, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, excuse me, I'm Mary Manel. I have lived in Oro Valley for about 3 years. I live over on La Quinada, Naranja area. I am very interested in the environment. I do, for all intents and purposes, work for an environmental management company. So that is part of my passion. I'm also on I guess it's the social and community group as well.
Yep.
Anyway, I do love the wild areas around Oro Valley.
Great. Thank you, Mary.
So I missed the prompt, sorry, to raise my hand for the wildlife.
Oh, great. Thank you. All right. So for tonight's, oh, sorry, before we get to tonight, I'd like to ask Renee if you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Renee. I'm working with Nalini on the 10-year plan, and I'm very excited to hear all of your thoughts and ideas, and happy to see everybody's faces tonight.
Thank you, Renee. So both Renee and I are here. Our role as staff is really to support you all through the discussions. So for tonight, I am going to share a brief presentation, but really the bulk of the meeting is going to be hearing from you. So I want to thank you all who were able to go online and answer the discussion questions. That will kind of be the basis for our conversation this evening. And so we'll share a virtual whiteboard for that here in a moment. But first, let me just go through some items. Let's see. All right, so really the purpose of tonight is to gather additional guidance and ideas related to the priorities that we heard from residents over the past year. So over the past year, there was a survey that went out. We also did over 90 events, as well as had a engaging website, an interactive website, where we really got a lot of information from residents about their expectations and priorities for the future. So that tied with what we gather from your group, as well as what is legally required for a 10-year plan, will all come together to formulate the goals, policies, and actions for the plan. And so the comments that you provided online, as well as that will generate from tonight's discussion, will be consolidated to form those goals, policies, and actions. So really tonight, our focus is on harvesting, if you will, harvesting ideas from you folks. Whereas our next meeting, we will focus more on building consensus on draft goals, policies, and actions. Now, our number one goal through this whole effort is to make sure that the plan represents residents and honors what they said over the past year. And so this is just a snippet of what we heard as it relates to environment and views. Again, there was a statistically projectable survey that went out. And what that means is when you see numbers like 80%, that really represents about 33,000 Oro Valley residents. But along with the projectable survey, again, we were out at events around the community, at different table pop-ups, and we had a lot of engagement online that kind of gave some extra context to the survey. So first and foremost is the environment, especially views and Oro Valley's natural beauty, is a top priority of residents. And that has been a top priority from residents for at least the last 5 general plans. It even goes back into the 90s. So I think that's been definitely a consistent aspect of Oro Valley. As you can see here, specifically making sure mountain views are maintained, native plants, especially saguaros and ironwoods, wildlife corridors, and conservation areas. Something a little bit new in this plan, though, is that last guiding principle bullet point, which is making sure that environmental resources are prioritized when considering development. And not that that hasn't been done in the past, but it definitely has not been at the forefront in a 10-year plan before. Now, I hope everyone had a chance to read through the background reports, but I did want to touch on a couple things just based on the comments, the responses you all posted online. First, Oro Valley is almost built out. The amount of remaining land is about 12%, but 6% of that already has an approved plan, which means it's essentially awaiting construction. Of our land in Oro Valley, 30% of it is open space. Now, open space does mean both natural undisturbed desert areas. It also includes landscaped areas, parks, and golf courses. And you can kind of see the breakdown of that in the chart on the bottom of the screen. And as you can see, a lot of the open space is in common areas owned usually by HOAs or private property owners. However, most of this is platted as open space common area, so it doesn't exactly mean it can be developed. It is set aside and generally a requirement as they went through the development process. So continuing on environment, the town also has what we call our environmentally sensitive lands ordinance. So what that focuses on is the types of open space. So not all open space is created equally. We're really looking for connectivity between open space for wildlife corridors. ESL also did a comprehensive planning. So there is something called the ESL map, which essentially mapped the whole entire town for environmental resources. And it focuses on habitat preservation. Now, a big part of ESL is balancing development with environmental resources, and this is through the way that properties are developed. So an example on the screen, for instance, is, in some areas that were not subject to ESL, there's still definitely open space, but they may not be as connected as you would get with a property that developed under our environmentally sensitive lands ordinance, shown to the left-hand side of that image. Looking ahead, though, we do want to make sure that environmental resources are mapped on any areas for potential annexation. And at this point, too, in the town's lifetime is making sure these sensitive lands are maintained as well as views. Now, when it comes to native plants, our native plants do have to be identified with a treatment plan for all new developments. And some native plants that are significant, and what I mean by significant, those are going to be your taller saguaros as well as your bigger Paula verdes, ironwood, and velvet mesquites. They do have to either be preserved in place or transplanted or mitigated. So what that means is if you do have to remove it, you do have to replace it with a new plant. Specifically, though, saguaros that are 24 feet or taller with 2 or more arms do have to be preserved in place. Those are what we call heritage saguaros. We also have a low water native plant list. So landscaping in subdivisions and commercial properties, they can only plant plants that are on that list. And we also have a hydro seed mix, which is very unique. Not all jurisdictions do this, but in Oro Valley we have one. So we also have requirements for the types of seed mixes that folks can use. And then looking ahead is making sure that list stays up to date, not only for what's approved to be planted in Oro Valley, but what are the prohibited plants that we don't want to see in Oro Valley. And usually this is our invasive species. And then when it comes to views and other resources, you may be aware, but Oro Valley does have 2 scenic corridors. That's Oracle Road and Tangerine. And what those corridors do is it adds more zoning requirements to restrict building heights to make sure those views are protected. There's also code requirements for peaks and hillsides. And again, it's just making sure that those are remain intact or that there's minimal grading allowed to make sure that those aren't disturbed. Tonight, we'll also be talking about climate and sustainability. This is a newer area for our 10-year plan, and it's based on what we heard from residents. So it's not exactly a state requirement, at least not all of it is, but we did hear more comments when we were out at events that people are interested in climate. Really what we heard was wanting more waste reduction or recycling programs, more solar and energy efficiency use of those types of technology, but also a focus on heat and how that can be reduced through landscaping and building design, and then supporting electric vehicles to reduce carbon emissions. And then lastly, we have reached out to key groups who work in these areas, and they provided some information just for you as residents to consider as you're going through this process. Residents are our priority for creating the plan. This is your plan, but we want to make sure you have all the information and tools you need to start developing it. What we heard from the U.S. Green Building Council is, if you're not aware, there is something called LEED for Cities. You may be aware of LEED for buildings. That's really making sure that buildings are energy efficient, but there's also a LEED for Cities, which has a set of standards and benchmarks that cities can apply for to get certified as a LEED city. I do believe some of the surrounding areas may have this certification, but it's something that the town could look into if this group thinks it's worthwhile. We also reached out to the Dark Sky Arizona, and what they provided was making sure our lighting codes are up to date to reduce light pollution, also making sure it's enforced, but they also made some wanted the group to know that, it's more than just visibility of stars, that when it comes to light pollution, it impacts wildlife, our health, native plants, and energy use, and more. And just so you are all aware, there is an effort statewide to maintain dark skies. So Pima County and Tucson are currently updating their lighting codes. Pinal County either just finished or they're very close to finishing updating theirs, as well as Santa Cruz County just finished theirs. So there seems to be almost a statewide effort focus on this. And then lastly, we reached out to the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection. A lot of what they said is similar to what Dark Sky said, as well as the green building, but also making sure that that we are protecting our wildlife corridors and habitats, looking for safer crossings. I think some of you also mentioned that as well. This coalition specifically did work on the wildlife crossing at Oracle Road. And then looking at our riparian and watershed management areas, which I think many of you have also discussed. And then lastly, when it comes to development, is looking at infill or more compact development to conserve more open space. So again, all of this is just for your consideration through the discussion. So tonight we will be using what's called a virtual whiteboard. All your comments that you put online have been added to that whiteboard. So when I share it, your view may be small, but you can change your view without impacting anyone else's. If you look in the lower right-hand screen, part of the screen, you'll see a navigation menu. You can zoom in or out. You can even use this little hand icon to move yourself around so that you're able to keep up with the discussion. And again, that won't affect anybody else's view, so please use that as you need. And then lastly, I do want to remind folks that if you have participated in the kickoff event on January 28th, we did discuss ground rules a bit in depth. So I just want to remind everyone of the ground rules that the group accepted, and I need everyone's help to make sure that this meeting is efficient and productive. We do have a lot to get through, and so I just ask that we stay focused on the category we're talking about because we will get through it all, but this will help the conversation moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and share the whiteboard, so you should see it pop up on your screen here in a moment. And I know when it pops up, you won't be able to see anything. You might just see a bunch of colors. I will zoom in here in a moment. But first and foremost, well, first, can everyone see the whiteboard, even though you might not be able to read it? Okay. So I just want to first say thank you and give gratitude to all of you. The sheer amount of comments on here, I can tell you not only the amount, but the thoughtfulness that you all put into your comments is very helpful and definitely something we wouldn't experience otherwise if you hadn't done the homework. So very much appreciated. So for our discussion tonight, we're going to get through all of these. We're going to start over in the what's yellowish orange, and we're going to talk about open space conservation areas as well as environmental resources. A lot of your responses to those questions were very similar, so we'll kind of talk about those together. We'll then move over to our orange column, which is focused on the development patterns. So, and how to make sure we have those environmental resources protected. We'll then move to purple, which we'll talk about views, and then red, which is our heat mitigation questions. And then next we'll kind of switch gears and go more into that will be a good segue into more of our climate related sections, which are recycling programs in teal, solar and energy efficiency in green, and then electric vehicles in blue. And then we'll wrap up tonight with some of the other ideas that you had that didn't fit any of these categories, but we still want to discuss. So with that, I'm going to move us over to our yellow group, and I'm going to quickly go through the topics under the yellow group and the questions. Now, staff will be scribing, so you do not need to worry about scribing. We'll have you raise your hand to speak. But again, your main focus is just making sure you're able to see the screen. And so under open space, conservation, environment, resources, we had two questions about what factors should be considered when identifying open space area, conservation areas, and also what environmental resources need to be protected. So that columns under there are looking at surrounding areas, wildlife connectivity, native plants and rock outcrops, washes, stormwater runoff, aquifers, natural habitats, and then maintaining and increasing open space. So we're going to start first with surrounding areas. I'm going to zoom in. We'll start with the first two. So we have surrounding areas and wildlife connectivity. So that's columns 1 through 8. I'm going to give everyone a moment to read through, but if you have any questions about the comments, you want to add to them, or if you want to elaborate or clarify a comment you made, please raise your hand. And Keith, did you have a?
Yeah, I just can't see anything.
Oh, okay. So Keith, what you may want to do on that lower right-hand navigation menu is click on the little arrow and choose Fit to Screen.
Yeah, that's not even there.
No? Oh, okay.
No.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing for one moment and I'll reshare. And you may have to click on follow. So for the group, just one moment. Let me.
Sorry.
No, all good. Get right back into it. Did it come up for you now, Keith? No. So I'm going to ask, Renee, if you would please put your phone number in the chat. And then Keith, if you can give Renee a call and she can try to troubleshoot you through it. But Keith, even if you can't see the whiteboard, I'll go through the comments if you have anything to add. So the comments for surrounding areas were, take that into consideration when it comes to open space conservation areas, and then wildlife connectivity as being really important.
It's there now.
Yeah. Oh, it's there now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so I'll give everyone a moment to read through again. If you have any questions, you want to elaborate on any of your comments, or if you want to ask somebody, or you want to make any clarifications, please raise your virtual hand. And we're on comments 1 through 8.
Also, if anybody needs to or wants to put it in the chat instead of saying it out loud, I will take that down as well. And Emily, you can read that out loud as well.
Like most people are done reading. Any comments, questions? Want to elaborate for surrounding areas or taking surrounding areas into consideration and wildlife connectivity? Sherry?
Yeah, obviously I got my camera to work.
Yeah.
I had a question about surrounding areas. Does this also include the roads in the surrounding areas? Because I think that has a definite impact into wildlife connectivity. For example, if you have a main road near the Skyhawk development, right? You've got Tangerine right there. So that was something I was interested in finding out, is if that is also included in the surrounding areas. And then my comment about wildlife connectivity, comment 6, I found very interesting about finding out if, currently the wildlife is thriving or they're being impacted by their ability to move around our different developments.
Great. So maybe I'll ask that to the rest. So those of you who commented on the surrounding areas, or even those of you who didn't, were you thinking of roadways as well included in that? And if you'd raise your hand, if you want to. Oops. So Mary or Rosa, I think you commented under, or Nihar, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Oh, yeah, I just had a follow-up question on that. So when we do say surrounding areas, that's just like the surrounding areas of like Oro Valley itself, right?
Again, maybe Rosa or Mary. I think you had comments under surrounding areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the surrounding areas would be like, anything open next to the neighborhoods, like, and this could be along the roads, this could be washes. This could even be like where we abut other property, like the Catalina State Park, like, making sure that animals and, people can see the views and animals can traverse the area. I mean, it's just more of, I mean, it's kind of what we do already, but we have to kind of maintain that standard going over to the next 10 years because we're so much built out now that we have to make sure we maintain a lot of these open areas. But there is one wildlife bridge, I think everyone mentioned that does go over. I think some people mentioned having more of those, but I mean, I think it's important that that we maintain minimally what we have, even though there's a lot of, 10 years is a long time, and you want to make sure that, we maintain the standards that we have in the open areas. But we have a lot of washes in Oro Valley, and a lot of bridges, and all of those areas are wildlife traversing areas, especially the washes, so I don't know if everyone noticed that one community that's going in off Naranja in what was a kind of a low-lying riparian area. And that's because the zoning came over from Pima County, so we really didn't have a choice for that. But I've seen a lot of comments online, people going, why are we doing this? That was a wash, but that's the kind of thing that we can't control because that was someone's property and it had entitlement that came over from Pima County. But like the other areas that are, that washes and things of that nature, we can put in this plan that we want to keep a priority to those environmental areas. And if there is an option, then it defers to the plan to say, hey, that's a priority for us. So that's why this planning process is so important, because if somebody wants to change the zoning of a piece of open space, they have to meet the standards of the general plan. So that's why I said it should be, any open areas around, and especially any areas that have mature trees and saguaros of trees, especially because if people love the birds here, and without trees, there's no birds. And so in order to keep the birds able to, stay in Oro Valley, we need to have a focus on making sure we keep mature trees here as well. So, but yeah, I think it means anything along the roads, the washes, some open areas that are maybe like in between properties that won't be developed. There's also properties that are meant to stay open, like Vistoso Trails, which I saw you had that under open space and not parks, but it is also a recreational. So we have some recreational properties that we want to remain open. So it's anything and all of the above.
Thank you, Rosa. Okay, we're going to go to Andy and then Keith.
Okay. So, thank you, Rosa, for describing the surrounding areas, because that was kind of confusing to me, but sounds like you're referring to open space. But one really interesting aspect of that you mentioned is that these properties have different owners and different governmental jurisdictions. And so to me, that's a key point to kind of try to harmonize the land use across these different ownerships and jurisdictions, at least a little bit. I mean, I know people want to have 100% ownership of their land and decide everything that goes on therein, but anyway.
Very good point.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I am scribing these on our board, so they'll go into developing the goals, policies, and actions. Keith?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on both Mary and Andy's comments. I see several areas in Oro Valley. One in particular, I think of, it's near the Ironwood High School. And that surrounding area around Naranja is like largely void of any really good plant life. And it's just a bunch of rock and it's very hot. I know it's got a nice pathway for biking and walking and such, but it just seems like it's way too much to me. And I would like to try to avoid that going forward because it's taking away a lot of the natural habitat that could help reduce heat effects in the neighborhoods. People that are walking along the path and it's just wide open. There's nothing there to shade it. So to me, that would be a good thing to include in the future. And I don't know if something could be done about what's there now, but that's just one example I can think of as far as adjoining spaces go. It seems like we could improve the surrounding area to make it more habitable, yeah. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Keith.
Yeah.
Okay. Good point as well. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving on then. So the next column was, and Rosa talked on this a little bit as well, but native plants as well as rock outcrops. And we'll talk about this one along with washes, stormwater, and aquifers, because riparian areas, which are washes, came up and kind of in some of these comments. So we're on 9 through 20. And it looks like the comments are related to saguaros, ironwood trees, to make sure they're protected for habitats, but also, again, those riparian areas, which do provide corridors for wildlife. And then dry riverbeds and looking at the watershed management of the area. So give everyone a moment to read. Rachel?
So I have a comment on each of the sections. So the first thing about native plants that I think you've sort of alluded to when you were describing the rules, specifically around saguaros and mature trees, is that whenever you transplant a saguaro, for example, you are risking that it is not going to survive in the new spot that you're putting it. So anytime you remove even a 4-foot or a 6-foot saguaro, you are basically risking that it's not going to do well in the new location. So that's just another thing, like as we're thinking about specifically native plants and new developments, is for me, like maintaining in place as much native plant life as possible is ideal. And, various organizations exist to mitigate these factors, like if they absolutely have to be moved. But the more you can keep things in place, the better, because they risk dying otherwise. And then my second quick note on the stormwater runoff and watershed management is that, we have this great organization in Tucson that does a ton of work around water harvesting and teaching people how to do that in their homes. And also, I think they may even work with municipalities, I'm not sure. So we have that great resource here that they could be somebody to tap into. Watershed Management Group, I think they're called. That would be just a great place to go to for that.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm getting your comments down, and we will definitely talk about water conservation and harvesting here in more detail here in a moment too.
Okay.
And then Nihar?
For native plants, I think beyond just preserving the native plants we already have in the open spaces, I think it's also important to plant more native plants, especially along trails, because there's a lot of trails I walk across that are relatively empty, so it makes the trail look ugly and you're just like looking at the road, and there's a lot of noise pollution as well. And one trail that does this really well is the trail on Naranjo Road from Ironwood leading up to the library. It has a lot of tree cover from native plants such as mesquite and Palo Verde. And so it's like benefiting native plants while also giving us nice trails to walk on.
Thank you. You said between Ironwood and the public library is the.
Yeah, on around Neuron Hill Road.
And then Keith?
Yeah, I want to follow up on that as well. I mean, a lot of times when areas are developed, you may not be disturbing the native plants, but just disturbing the surrounding area and the way water gets in the area really impacts the plants. So I think involving people like watershed management would be a really good thing to do. They have a lot of guidance, and the Native Plant Society here also has a lot of good guidance on what to do and what plants maybe you want to put in to deal with those changes potentially. So to the last point about adding plants in that different plant species to make up for those that are now impacted would, I think, be a good thing to do.
Thank you. And then we're gonna go to Rose. We haven't heard from you yet. Oh, and Rose, you're muted. Sorry.
Okay, one thing I want to mention, when we have these developments, a lot of times they'll plant some native plants or Southwest native like Texas sage, and then in comes the pesticides, and they don't allow things like the bristle, native flowers like desert marigold and that sort of thing. They'll get sprayed, and I wonder if there's some way we can use less of, especially the pre-emergence coming in. I saw up and down Tangerine, and I thought, well, that's going to stop our wildflowers from growing, when they start spraying the pre-emergent on there. So I think it's something we should somehow think about using less of as these developments come in, and talking to these HOAs about that.
Thank you. And just a reminder, you can definitely also use the chat if you're more comfortable with that. So that is available to folks as well. Okay, next is Andy, Sherry, and then Rosa.
Okay. Yeah, 3 quick points. One is on that last same topic of the native flowers.
Mhm.
It probably comes down to what's our definition of a native flower and our definition of a weed, and maybe we're just not all on the same page there, and then second point, a concern I have is with the trees. Usually we discuss protecting large saguaros, but what I've been affected by and concerned by is neighbors who, in our HOA, we have a very good amount of emphasis on planting native plants, but we have folks with mature mesquite trees that are really a amenity for the whole neighborhood, and they just cut those down without any consultation or anything, and that's a concern of mine, is removing those large trees without any need for consultation or anything. And then my third point is it's similar about paving. I'm curious, what are the constraints on people paving? For example, the part of the controversy with the large church over by the CDO high school, wanting to pave more and more land. I'm curious what constrains that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And then Rachel, in response to yours, did add, if anybody knows if there's any laws about cutting down mature trees. I do know there's laws for saguaros. I'm not sure about mature trees though, but we can definitely look into that. Let's go to Sherry and then Rosa.
Yeah, I just wanted to align with what Rose said earlier about herbicides and pesticides and the pre-emergent chemicals. I had actually had that in my comment for, I think, one of these questions. What concerns me about that is also the pre-emergent, and as somebody else mentioned, these plants that live in the desert, the birds, the bees, the insects all need those. And I think people forget about that. They forget about the bees and how important the birds are. Because we're focused on, wildlife like the javelina and the bobcats and the coyotes and that kind of stuff. So these smaller parts of our habitat, the insects and so on, also have a really important part in just the whole ecosystem of what we're trying to produce here. And I think to me, that's a thread through this whole thing, that all of these different things that we're talking about are interconnected, and they really, really are important for our environment.
Thank you, Sherry. And then Rosa?
So I would be remiss if I didn't bring up my passion project. So as far as native plants and open space, the old Vistosa Golf Course, which is now called the Vistosa Trails Nature Preserve, but is anything but a nature preserve. It's 200 acres of a dead golf course. And my hope would be that in the next general plan that it could be a focus for reparations, because the only way to manage that property when it rains, which unfortunately, it didn't rain a lot this year, but when it rains, it bursts into a very living, invasive environment of anything that you can pretty much pick up on the wind. And it depends on when the rain comes, the timing of the rain, what kind of invasives you get. So it has to be dealt with, and it's been a challenge. July will be 3 years since the property was gifted to the town. And we don't really have a plan yet because it is so difficult. One thing we have learned, we've all become educated on how difficult it is when you destroy desert to bring it back. It is very difficult and expensive and time consuming. So on April 16th, it'll be one of the agenda items on a town council meeting, finally, with some plans to come back and several methods of revegetation that are going to be presented, and it is going to be discussed by council as a beginning. But this is 200 acres, 80 of which were completely bladed for a golf course, and the remaining acreage was like enhanced desert planted by like the golf course operators. So when they stopped the watering, a lot of the stuff died. I didn't know this, but if you irrigate a mesquite tree, it changes the way the root system forms, and it doesn't put down a taproot. So then when they stopped the irrigation, the trees became less healthy and they became overrun with mistletoe, which is a natural occurring thing in the desert, but it kind of goes for the trees that are less robust. So it's kind of sad to see a lot of these trees like succumbing to slow death because they were irrigated and now they're not. And so that's a big project that has to be dealt with, because if you don't want to spray herbicides, like the town it's not possible for the town to not spray some herbicides when we have a lot of rain. And that's the problem, because you have to by law not spread invasives. So they mow them and then they spray to try to keep it from coming back. So it's a real, so the lesson in this is, as we go forward in the next 10 years, don't disturb the desert, because bringing it back is really, really super hard. And that's one thing, the lesson that the education that we've all gotten, the only thing that comes back on its own are hackberry and desert broom. And that's really not a meaningful Sonoran desert environment, So anyway, I want to make sure that I stay true to my passion project and make sure it's in the 10-year plan, because all means of volunteer, town effort, other maybe society efforts can be accepted and appreciated to try to bring this thing back, because it's 200 acres of land. It's not a small amount of land, and it is definitely part of Oro Valley. So anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you, Rosa. We're gonna, Keith, and then we're gonna move to the next column. So Keith?
Oh, yeah, I just want to follow up on what Rosa said. I've noticed the same issue with the preserve. And one thing I was thinking of is possibly having organic matter brought in to help restore some of those areas on the golf course. And we've offered that maybe you could get some of the landscaping companies to chip up materials and drop them there, and then you could spread it. That would discourage a lot of the invasive growth, but it would also add organic material back into the soil to help it try to recover much quicker. If you keep spraying pesticides on it, it's just going to keep killing it. or herbicide, it's just going to keep destroying the microbiome in the soil. So that's my put. Try to get organic material brought in, and I know arborists would do it if you give them a means to do it, because it would save them money. They wouldn't have to go to landfills and keep adding more methane to our atmosphere. It's just maybe a suggestion for that project. It's just a thought I have, and I know I've talked to lots of people that have restored properties, and that's how we've done it. That's how we've done our property here in Oro Valley. It's so much nicer than it was. So just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Keith.
Yep.
Okay, the next two areas in our yellow section are talking about, and we kind of started talking about this, so good segue. Making sure natural habitats are maintained, and definitely, as brought up earlier, is that includes all creatures, bees, birds as well, and then maintaining the amount of open space and increasing it. So Carolyn, if you want to start us off. Oh, and you're muted, Carolyn.
Unmute. Thank you. So this is somewhat related to Rosa's comments about the Stoso Nature Preserve. I am on the board of the Friends of Push Ridge Golf, which was an organization that at the same time Vistoso was being closed, our course was being closed, and we worked hard to keep it open. And I think the council voted to keep it open. And I think one of the things that can be done with the many golf courses in Oro Valley is focusing on preserving what we have and minimizing the chemicals that we use. And there is an organization that we have proposed. It's sitting in Parks and Rec right now, our recommendation, but we have proposed that the golf courses that Troon manages here apply for Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary Program through the Audubon International. And it helps golf courses focus on the important things that we've been talking about for all of our environment: water quality management, education for the community, chemical use reduction, environmental planning, wildlife and habitat management, water conservation. So that was the reason that I signed up to be part of this committee, because I just feel it's really important that these golf courses that are acreages, open space, also need to be part of the planning that the town does. So that's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to keep us moving on, but always can go back or add comments. So next, so we talked now about what resources we need to make sure are protected. So now kind of looking at development patterns and how not only what resources should be protected, but how they could be protected. And so some comments under this one were about infill, focusing on infill more than expansion. And then compact design. So that was part of the question, was some of building cluster lots to have more connected open space. And the comments about also making sure that that's still compatible to the surrounding area. So I'll give everyone a moment to read through these 3 columns. And please raise your hand if you have anything to add or want to clarify or elaborate on. And we're now on 27 through 36. And Andy, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll try. I'm a little conflicted about the compact design. I do believe that it's important to have affordable housing somewhere in the community, even a beautiful community like Oro Valley. But well, so compact can mean, I guess, houses close together, or it can mean apartment buildings, multi-story. But even a 2-story house or building, it does start, depending on its elevation of the land there, it can really make the beautiful surrounding, views of the hills disappear quickly. And then you don't even know where you are anymore. You're just in the midst of a bunch of buildings and commercialism. So I guess my point would be that high density housing or commercial space, it needs to be in lower elevation spots where we don't lose our view shed.
Thank you. And we will talk more about height here in a moment in our purple section. And so maybe let me ask the group, or those of you who answered this, what were you thinking when you were talking about development patterns? Because you're right, Andy, it could be single family homes kind of clustered together, like the example I showed in the presentation. It could be high density residential going up instead of out. So let me ask the group, what were your thoughts on that, especially when you were answering this question? What did you have in mind? Nihar?
Yeah, I have a thought on compact design beyond housing. I think asphalt lots and big roads are a big problem that a lot of cities face because they take up a lot of space and take up natural land while also increasing the temperature of like our surrounding environment by taking in a lot of sunlight. And so I think by designing better for people and animals rather than cars, we can really reduce the amount of land that we're taking up from the natural habitat while also making our town a lot prettier.
Okay. And then Rachel said she was thinking that it was low height condos and single family homes. But Sherry, would like to hear from you, and then Rosa.
Yeah, just really quickly, what I was thinking as I wrote my comment was just a baseline for the plan, right? Is yes, that we definitely want to protect as much open space as possible. And that should be a component of any kind of planning for a development, no matter if it's high density, low density. Those types of elements that we've been talking about have to be part of a plan for the developer.
Okay. So I'm putting that regardless of the type of housing, it's just making sure all those environmental resources are protected. Okay. Rosa and then Keith.
So I think I have my response was that in some places, the compact housing with the centralized, like more open areas, but keeping the housing compact, like in apartment buildings or condos, it does have its place. But also another way to look at it is, although most people can't afford to live there, Stone Canyon does a really nice job of putting the homes in the landscape. So even there's a lot of still natural desert left and very restricted in what they're allowed to add to the environment. So that's another way to kind of protect the wildlife corridors and make sure that our native plants are as abundant and as possible. Because when you do the compact housing, usually there's been a blading and then the common area gets recreated. Maybe if there can be a way to avoid that, some of that mass blading. I know a lot of people talk about that. It's expensive to do though, because once you disturb that area, what you put back is never going to be as natural as it was. So, but I think there is a place for compact and then like centralized open space, but as long as they don't blade it to do it, if there's a way to kind of use that as a goal, a percentage of it wouldn't be disturbed to begin with, would be really good. So
Just to maybe add some additional information, you're right. So in Stone Canyon, Rosa's right. So on those individual lots, a lot of their property, so you buy property in Stone Canyon, you may have a conservation area on your lot, which means there's no disturb area. So that is one way to handle it. I will say it probably has higher risk because then we get grading violations, right? Where I bought my house, I didn't realize that was on there. I wanted a bigger yard and I went and graded it all. And that does happen. Most of our grading violations are individual lot owners who didn't realize they couldn't touch that area. Now, when it comes to these what we call them conservation subdivision designs, like Sanctuary, the one I showed on the screen. You're right, they do mass grade the area, but they don't mass grade the undisturbed area. So the area that they have to remain as open space undisturbed with those environmental resources, they don't grade, they don't go and restore those areas. Now there is some restoration though, you're right. They do have some where they have some restoration they have to do kind of where it bumps up where the lots are, but for the most part, those stay intact. But it's that balance, right? Then it's protected by an HOA, which may have less opportunity for disturbing. Doesn't mean there's zero opportunity. We've had grading violations with HOAs too. But just things to keep in mind as we're discussing. And then Keith?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with Rose's comment, but I mean, neighborhoods could be laid out in such a way, and maybe you can't avoid the blading completely, but you could interconnect streets to each other and make it much more passable for people and for wildlife, by the way. And then you would have more room for native plants and trees in between, I'll say, clusters of houses versus having them all just packed together, Just seems like a better way to do it because then you'd be even more connected within your neighborhood to your neighbors. I mean, and it'd be easy to move around. You wouldn't have to always drive. You could walk around. It just seems better.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so there's definitely various tools to use to try to
Right.
reduce the amount of grading.
Right.
Okay, and then I'm gonna keep moving us. So now let's get into views. You guys kind of started talking about that a little bit. I'm gonna just start with the first two columns. So there were comments about light pollution, including dark sky certification. There were also comments about building height and limiting building height. So we're on 37 through 45. If folks want to take a moment to read through there, and again, you feel free to use the chat. We also, if you haven't had a chance to speak, please make sure you raise your hand, and I'll be calling on those folks first. But of course, anyone's welcome to discuss. And we have a question, does the grading include infrastructure? Yes, it does. So they have to grade for the roadways and all the infrastructure. Any thoughts about light pollution or building heights? And I will let folks know that in line with the region, our lighting code is very outdated. So we are looking to update it as well in the future. I don't have an exact time frame on that. We're kind of honestly waiting for Pima County and Tucson to see kind of how they go, because, and then that will right size it for us. But ours does need to be updated. Rose? Oh, and let me have you unmute yourself, please.
I just want to say, I mean, I agree with, we have to have, control the light pollution. I love that we have the dark sky night. One thing I do want to know is there somebody that manages that? Like, is there anybody that, tells you if you don't have the correct lighting on your garage or whatever? Or, and I think that might be something that we need to look at if we don't. Building height is important for sure. And the other thing to look at for architectural design, I know I have a problem with it, and maybe a lot of other people do. We have a lot of birds here, and I know some other cities are concerned with the amount of birds that die flying into buildings, and maybe that's something that we should look at, since we're on a migratory path and we do have a lot of birds here, so.
Thank you. So in terms of the lighting code, we do enforce it. So when it comes to individual homeowners, so when new homes are built, they submit lighting plans. So we do see making sure that their lights are shielded, at what height they're at, things of that nature. Now, as of course, if you've lived in your home for 20 years and you want to go put a light on, we field those questions, but if somebody puts like a flood lamp out, we don't go looking for it generally in residential areas. It's complaint basis. So people can call in and let us know, like, hey, I think there's a lighting issue. We'll then go out at night to see if it's what's happening, and then we'll work with the homeowner to hopefully get them back in compliance. We do have an inspector though that goes out, I believe, monthly. I'm not 100% sure on how often he goes out, but he does go out routinely at night to look at the lighting for commercial areas. So to make sure that they're being turned off on time and at the right settings. Let's see. I do not know if we have any requirements for, I'm sure we do, but I don't know what they are, regarding the streetlights color, and how bright those are, but I can definitely look into that for the next meeting. And then with regards to lighting code, making red lights are used to protect bat species, so that's good to know. Thank you for sharing. So we'll also have to make sure that's all included in our lighting code of making sure that our lights also protect our wildlife. Okay, we'll go to Sherry, then Andy.
Yeah, I just had a really quick question about the building height. Has the town of Oro Valley gotten any pushback on some of our more, I don't want to say constraining, but requirements for building height and color and signs? I know when the Target went in and they built that shopping center, there was a lot of drama around that. And has Tucson resolved that issue, like having a way to educate developers on what our expectations are for design?
So we definitely have, with our design standards, I think sometimes there's pushback, but for the most part, I think folks do know that Oro Valley expects high quality here. We always joke that you can tell when you're driving into Oro Valley just by how it looks. So I don't honestly think it's too unexpected. And the design standards, we aim to have them prescriptive enough to make sure everything fits in Oro Valley, but there is still that flexibility for your architect to be creative, if you will. And so I just think people know that we have high quality design here. So most of them, I think, try to hopefully rise to the occasion. And then for the building heights, a lot of them are allowed within code. And now if they're asking for new building heights, they do go through a public review process to make sure that surrounding neighbors are able to provide feedback. So for those of you who may pay attention to council meetings or may live in the area, the Oro Valley Church of Nazarene just asked for a building height request. And there was a fair amount of input from neighbors as well as their congregation about that. So it was a council decision. Does that help answer your question? Okay. And then Andy?
Yeah, the topic of light pollution makes me think of two other kinds of pollution, noise and visual. And I'll start with the visual. It's so pleasing, so nice that there are not billboards and garish signage, prominent all over the place like there are in most places in the United States. And it's easy to take it for granted, but I suspect that is by design and enforcement. So, right?
It is, yes.
Yes.
So we
So
do not
that
allow
is wonderful, and that's worth mentioning. It makes a huge difference. It just makes me feel calmer and happier. And then about sound, people love their engines, and they just love to roar around up and down the roads. And I get a little bit of that, but I do wonder again, what's the limit? How loud is there any loudness that's too loud where a policeman would say you have to put some kind of muffler on that, or we measure the decibels and you can't drive around in that. Maybe it's fun for you, but it's not fun for the thousands of people that you're going by every morning.
I am not sure, but I could definitely reach out to OBPD and see. I'm not sure if there's a limit where they would be required to, and I don't know if anybody else knows, please raise your hand. But good points. I got those down. I am going to move us on to architecture design, and I do want to this one flows into, so this also flows into our red group about building materials. And the reason is, as many of you brought up under architecture design, it's using energy efficient materials, making sure the architecture blends in with the area, but also because we're talking about height, rooftops got brought up. But also rooftops got brought up in terms of building materials and heat mitigation. So Oro Valley, we have what we call a light reflective value. And so that does right now where it's at would not allow white rooftops. So I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on this because it's, you know, having rooftops that blend into the Sonoran Desert, but then on one hand, it's energy efficient rooftops. So want to get your thoughts on that. Rosa and then Keith.
So here's how I feel. I just painted my house the lightest color allowable in the HOA, and it was a dark gold color. It has made a huge difference in how much heat the house absorbs during the afternoon sun. So if that white roof changes the environmental impact of the heat on that house, I think sometimes you have to balance, you know, arbitrary, you know, may design features with, you know, with environmental, you know, compatibility. And I think that I didn't realize how much heat like different colors absorb, but it really is something. And we have to use less energy, less air conditioning, you know, and everything is interrelated. So I would say if it has a very documented, verifiable benefit environmentally, then I think we should consider it, just because in the last 10 years to this 10 years, everything has become more critical with the environment, you know, our resources, our water, how much like electricity people are using, everything. And so I think we need to kind of look at it, just because, I mean, it has to be good specs and you have to be able to prove that this has a good, you know, verifiable value. But I couldn't believe the difference in paint, because someone suggested that, because the gold color doesn't last very long and it looks pretty bad pretty quickly. But also for the heat, I didn't realize there would be such a difference, and it's a huge difference. So it's not white by any stretch of the imagination, but it looks white, you know what I mean, compared to what I used to have. And it's a huge difference in how much heat you feel when you walk out, you know, when the sun is shining at 4 in the afternoon. So anyway, I thought and my AC bill has gone down a little bit. So I thought I'd share that little observation.
Thank you, Rosa. And I do want to clarify, when I said we don't allow bright rooftops, that's within our design standards. So that mostly applies to like your model home subdivisions and your commercial areas. So custom homes are a little bit different.
Okay.
And then as Rosa pointed out, HOAs may have their own rules too. So Rachel?
Yeah, so as we talk about things like rooftops, landscaping, solar, so many of these things are so important for helping mitigate the heat island effect, which is, I feel like, should be one of our top priorities in everything we're talking about. But they're also really expensive. And I know that we live in an area with relatively high incomes for the state. But we just installed solar last year and it was prohibitively expensive to pay it up front, even with the rebates available. So anywhere when we're talking about building material, like things with roofs, ways to landscape your yard to include more native plants, or with berms and other water maintenance, anything we can think of, and I had put some comments about this, that the town could encourage with discounts of some kind, or deals with local companies, I think would be hugely helpful. Because I think one thing that turns people off when they look at the upfront costs of some of these things is like, oh, it's just going to be too expensive. Especially if you're starting from scratch on something. So just putting that out there.
Thank you. And we will definitely get to rebates and incentives here in a moment. But first, before I move on, are there other comments about rooftops. I saw some heads shaking that maybe it would be, oh, Andy?
Yeah, could you clarify, Lenny, about the white rooftops? It seems like typically I see a white vinyl roof, with flat roof. I mean, is there a problem with that
So
for anybody?
our code doesn't allow that for like your model homes or your commercial areas. We have what we call, it's called a light reflective value, but essentially all that does is manage the spectrum of colors you can use. And so it gets down to like beiges and light grays, but it doesn't get all the way down to like the white color. And
Would-
so that's the question is, as Rosa kind of stated in her comment, and some of the comments on here is there a path where, because of the benefit of the energy efficiency, that we should look at our codes and update them to allow white roofs if it's beneficial?
Okay, if I'm understanding correctly, that would be a roof that's not visible from the ground or from most roadways.
Correct. Right. Correct.
And so I would say white needs to absolutely be allowed, yes. Yeah. Now, completely brilliantly white houses, they are kind of jarring to see in the landscape, but the roof, well, anyway, temperature, energy use. I mean, it will bring us to allow white roofs sooner or later.
So I did put for your comment, visibility is low for the roofs. It's okay for the roofs, but not for entire homes, possibly.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thanks.
And then Keith?
I mean, I don't understand that quite. I mean, all the flat roof houses in my neighborhood have white roofs. And they're all custom homes.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that restriction. It clearly didn't apply to these homes.
No, it doesn't apply to custom homes.
Okay, all right. I missed that point. Sorry.
No, I didn't clarify it at first,
Yeah.
so thank you
All
for
right,
asking.
thanks.
Okay, so also on heat mitigation, and we talked about this a little bit before, but landscaping, so using native plants, increasing landscaping along roadways. But then also with this came up comments about landscape maintenance. So I think maybe Andy, you brought it up of people removing trees or even HOAs removing trees, and making sure that they're replaced if they're not supposed to. So we're on 60 through, looks like 71. So are there any additional comments about landscaping that folks want to, and landscape maintenance that folks want to make? Keith?
I just had a question. You said you have a list of all the native plants that are allowed, and does that get updated routinely, or was that
So
done in?
I have been here 8 years and it hasn't been updated since I've been here. I
I'm
didn't.
just, yeah, I'm just, sorry, I just wanted to know how it was created. I mean, there's a lot of native plants that are really good. So, and I see a lot of the same plants. I don't see a lot of diversity. So I'm just curious what's allowed. You may want to, maybe we need to work with the Native Plant Society here to update that, possibly.
So it was based off, so Arizona Department of Water Resources, they also produce a list of low water plants. So that's where it was derived from. We looked at their list and also incorporated the plants that are common to the Sonoran Desert. So, but to your point, it probably does need to be updated routinely. Carolyn and then Rose.
My neighborhood is just in the process of updating our CCNRs, and someone made the comment, or maybe you made the comment, that if a tree is removed, it needs to be replaced. And that is not part of our CCNRs, and I think part of the reason is because of the cost. So if that is becoming a Oro Valley requirement, I think our neighborhoods need to be advised. So is that what you're saying?
So if a subdivision, and this is mostly our model home subdivisions, they usually have landscape plans that go along with them. And so the landscape plan is what we enforce. So if there's a landscape plan and they start removing vegetation, then they either have to revise their landscape plan or they need to replace it. And we are seeing HOAs come in more often as the town matures. We've seen a lot in Rancho Vistoso start removing grass and sod and replacing it, and a lot of the trees being replaced too. So yeah, I put on here maybe some education to HOAs as that becomes more prevalent.
Okay. Does Oro Valley encourage people to remove grass financially by donating rock or something? I know my neighborhood in Colorado does that.
We don't have a program for that now, no.
Thank you.
And then Rose?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think maybe we need to, as someone else mentioned too, make sure we know what we're talking about when we're talking about native plants. Is it native to the Sonoran Desert? Is it native to Arizona? Is it native to the Southwest? And that sort of thing, because I think it can get confusing for people. And especially since we're surrounded by the Sonoran, I might suggest we try to stick to the Sonoran Desert native plants. And the other subject I had brought up was the pruning of these native plants. I know I just took a class at the Watershed Management Group on how to prune native plants, and I think that might be something the city should look at doing too, is learning how to prune the native plants so that they don't topple over, they do last longer, they're healthier, and pruning only a certain percentage every year. So that's a comment.
Thank you. We'll go Keith and then Andy.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight item 63. I totally agree. I don't know who wrote that, but I totally agree with doing that. And I think we definitely want to include that in our plan going forward with creating basins and directing water to the vegetation. And then mulching is huge, especially around trees, to preserve their water during the summer for sure. So I just think that's a really important part of the landscaping piece. And it should be a requirement for all the new neighborhoods to put in those features. So, yeah, just a comment.
Yep. Andy and then Rosa. Yep, and Andy, you're muted, sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking about we can have rules about what people can and can't do, but does anyone know if there is a sort of a native plant society or some kind of voluntary organization that can advise homeowners or property owners and on a voluntary basis and help guide them to good water use and good planting, landscaping that's good for water use and for the environment, native species, etc. Because that would be really great if maybe people do things that aren't so beneficial because it's what they see in the store or what the landscaping, the nursery, wants to sell them.
Yep.
But
it looks
they
like
don't have
Sherry
time
said.
to do all the reading and stuff that would be required.
Sure. So it looks like Sherry said Tohono Shoal, it has a great resource as well as watershed management as well. But we can see if we can include partnering with them. Thank you. Rosa, then we'll go to Rose.
So I just think that the water use of different plants needs to be more publicized for people who are just building, or we somehow need to be able to tie water use to landscaping, because that's where most of our water use goes. We do conserve. I mean, the last report I heard that we are conserving even more, though we didn't get a lot of rain this year than we typically do over the winter. But most people don't know that what they're planting is going to take a certain amount of water when they move here. Like I didn't, and I've little by little changed my landscaping. So water, that, you know, not just plantings and landscaping, but mixing the water conservation aspect in with the landscaping so that both goals are met, because we're not talking about water per se now, but that will be a topic. And one of the biggest issues with water is landscaping. Grass being the worst because it's a 95% evaporation, but there are some trees that require, like for example, excessive amount of fruit trees. Like fruit trees require a lot of water, and people want to have a fruit tree, but a lot of people don't realize how much fruit that tree is going to produce, you know, and they plant like 4 or 5 different kinds of orange trees, and then they've got way more oranges than they can use, and they're using a lot of water on top of that. But it's just an education thing. Like I said, I didn't know when I moved here, and now as things that require more water don't make it or die, I either just don't replace it at all, or I replace it with something that doesn't need water at all, like, you know, some type of a ground succulent that doesn't need water. So, you know, it's just an education process. A lot of people move here from, like, you know, colder, wetter climates, and they have no idea what they're doing when they put the landscaping in. And then, you know, Peter always says the majority of the water use is going to landscaping in Oro Valley. So, I mean, into outside use, not inside use. So landscaping with the idea of water usage.
Great. Thank you. Okay, and then Rose, and then we'll move on to the next category.
I just wanted to say the Arizona Plant Society is a great resource. Wild Ones is a good resource, and they're all more than happy to consult with you. And there's also, I know, I work with Strategic Habitats, a consultant who's very good at advising people about native plants. And I think it would be a good thing for the city to do like native plant swaps, or we could do native plant classes, or just landscaping classes, or pruning classes, that sort of thing. In other communities that I live in, we do them either through the city or through the library, or that sort of thing to go along with it. That would be at no cost or low cost if you could, you know. The other thing, speaking about the Vistoso Preserve, a lot of those mesquite trees that were planted by the golf course that came in there, they were not native mesquites, and they required more water, and that was part of the reason a lot of them died too. So that's things to consider, as, you know, get a native mesquite instead of one that's not. What else was I going to say? I think that's it.
Thank you, Rose.
Mhm.
And then Andy, I think I saw your hand go up. I don't know if you still wanted to make a comment.
Oh, I realized it's related to water conservation.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Thank you. We'll get there in one moment. Some other ideas about heat mitigation. I think Nihar brought some of this up, is also looking at parking lots and how big they are. Also paving trails with natural materials. And then it looks like installing covered parking with solar. We do have it at this town campus, but not other town facilities. And then planting more trees. So I'm going to move us on to recycling and waste programs. So this, again, from what we heard from folks at events, especially as well as online, there was a want for more programs and events and opportunities to reduce waste. So under this, there were a lot of comments about just general education is needed. Kind of following some of your comments even about native plants, as folks don't know what they can recycle, where they can recycle. Also having recycling bins at parks and more information distributed marketing wise. The specific type of programs, we got a lot of comments about having opportunities to recycle batteries, electronics. Those are, seeming, from what I gather, hard to find in Oro Valley. Also hazardous waste. And then composting. We'll just go through these three first because they all fit on the screen. So comments about education, types of programs for recycling and composting. Nihar?
Yeah, so our school has actually done a lot of work with recycling, and one of the main things that they've done is working with this one organization. I forget the name of it. I'll find it later, but what the organization does is instead of recycling it traditionally, they make plastic bricks because a big problem with recycling and like recycling in cities and stuff is that it's actually a really ineffective method of turning plastic and reusing it and reducing the environmental impact. So what our school does is like instead of traditionally recycling it into recycling bins at your home where it's not gonna end up having much decrease on the environmental impact, we turn it into the school, and our school works with that organization to make plastic bricks so that they can be later used for housing, which does reduce environmental impact. So I think if the town looks into more effective methods of recycling and working with organizations like that, I think it can make a larger impact than and reduce the inefficiencies of the current method of recycling.
Thank you, Nihar. And it kind of goes along with what Rachel put in the chat, that only 5 to 6% of plastics are recycled. So reducing your overall plastic use would be good, and working with supermarkets to reduce plastic bags. Keith and then Andy.
Yeah, I'll follow up. So that company he's talking about it's called Bifusion.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And they have lots of drop-off sites within Tucson, but there's none up here in Oro Valley. I think it'd be really nice if we want to continue that. They have their own processing machine now, so they're going to start making blocks here in Tucson. Before they were all being shipped to California. So now it's going to be way more effective, and they're going to take in a lot more material. So I think it would be a good idea to try to get some drop-off sites here and within Oro Valley that people could use. And then the other thing I was going to comment on was about composting. I'm very, very passionate about it. And the community gardens of Tucson actually have sites at some of their community gardens where you can drop off your scraps from your kitchen or even your gardens or whatever you have. And then they take it to the Los Realis recycle facility, and then they make compost out of it, and then they bring it back for you to use for free. So it'd be, I think, pretty cool if we could do that here in Oro Valley as well and work with that same program. It wouldn't cost anything because they already have that in place. So anyway.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then before we go to the next part, Nihar, I want to go back to you. Is that Bifusion sound familiar?
Yeah, it was Bifusion. Thank you. And then just to follow up on the drop-off sites, yes, so our school works as a drop-off site now, but I think it's definitely a very good idea to have more drop-off sites in Oro Valley so it's accessible to people beyond just parents who attend or parents whose students attend the school. So like having town areas like the library or town offices be drop-off sites would, I think, definitely increase the amount of awareness for the program.
Thank you. We'll go Andy and then Rosa.
Yeah, the Bifusion blocks, I currently take my hard to recycle plastics to someone at church who lives in Tucson. She smuggles it into Tucson. So yeah, it would be nice to have a drop off close. And it's so cool because you don't have to, well, anyway, they don't have to be single types of plastic. So that's really awesome. And what I would like to add to that is if there's anything the city can do to allow that material to be used in construction or certain types of construction, then that would help create the demand for that. I mean, it would be great if we could do the recycling here, make the blocks, I mean, the collection, make the blocks, and actually have them used locally. Be more of a closed loop, not quite a true closed loop, but
Yeah.
so yeah, great idea. Same with the compost. We actually gather our compost, take it to a different friends in Tucson, and they take it to a service. They have to pay for the privilege of giving them material to make compost and then sell it. I love the idea of a cooperative approach where you, as a community, you make your own compost. Great ideas.
Rosa, then Keith.
So I agree with both of those wholeheartedly. The plastics, especially microplastics, is the next big medical, like thing we're going to hear about. We all have like a tablespoon of plastic in our brains. It actually gets into our brains. And it's because plastics have been around for 60 years and we didn't understand what the ramifications were going to be. So plastic, whoever said plastic only 5% 6% is recycled is absolutely right. I don't even know why they collect it, so that I think if we do two things, the plastic program and the compost should be two of the things we do. But the other thing is the electronics. It is so difficult to properly dispose of old motors, appliances. They don't make appliances, small ones especially, to last that long. And if there's it's really difficult to recycle these things. So we should really look into that. Like even a TV you have to pay to recycle. I don't know if you know that. Like most times you have to pay to recycle a TV. So there's really a need. And I know there are places down in Tucson, but they're not convenient at all. So we should probably look into that too, if we could, because electronics, I mean, I've like given them to people who take them to Mexico because they will try to like reuse the parts and stuff like to make other things, because I just think it's such a waste to put it in like, what do you do with it? Like an old blender that doesn't work, or, a can opener that doesn't work, and then TVs and batteries and all that stuff. And, but I really like our paper shredding thing that we do. I love that Oro Valley does that. But if we could like add on to that with the recycling of electronics, I think that would be good. But the plastic thing too, very good.
Thank you. Keith and then Rose.
Yeah, I have another comment. So related to plastics again, because it's such a gigantic problem that Rosa just pointed out. I totally agree. I work with Sustainable Tucson, and we are going to start a campaign to do a Skip the Stuff campaign starting this year. And what that involves is asking restaurants or hospitals, schools, etc., to skip using plastic utensils, condiments, straws, and go to more, metal utensils. No one needs a straw really, unless you can't really drink any other way. I mean, to try to reduce the actual stream of plastic, that is the goal. And then also Sustainable Tucson is coming out with a guide that people can get to online where they can learn about how to reduce plastics in their life and things they can do that are pretty simple things. So that's coming out shortly. So when that happens, I can send that out to everybody and let them know. So
Thank you.
yeah.
And then Rose, and then we'll move on to the next category.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing as he did, reduce, we always say reduce, reuse, and recycle. So teaching Oro Valley residents how to reduce plastics. If we have any manufacturing in town, advise them not to use plastics in the manufacture of their products and that sort of thing, and packing materials and that sort of thing. But I come from a town where I've had compost pickup at my front door with the waste once a week. Well, every 2 weeks is what they do it. And so coming here and not knowing what to do with my compost because I'm so compassionate about it was really one of the hardest things for me. So I know you can do it, picking up, putting all of these branches and stuff into a landfill is really not a good thing. And being able to resell the compost material it's being done in other cities. So I'm willing to look into that more for the city if we choose to do something like that too. And maybe waste management, I'm sure they know about it, they can get involved in that. So
you. And then we also have a comment about styrofoam, so we'll get that added, Rachel, that's also something that needs to be tackled, is the use of styrofoam at restaurants. Okay, so I'm going to move us on. I know there were folks that wanted to talk about water conservation, and then just some other general comments. So for water conservation, I do want to mention we'll have an entire meeting May 1st, where we're really going to get into water resources and conservation. Definitely want to give everyone an opportunity if you want to speak about it tonight, but just know we'll have an entire meeting just for water coming up. And then there were also some other comments related to community gardens we've talked about a little bit. And then we talked about the plastic and the packaging too. So for time, let me ask folks, we have about 10 minutes left. Are we okay? I have all the comments for water conservation. Are we okay moving forward, knowing we're going to talk about that here in a couple weeks? Okay. If we have time, we'll come back to it. So looking at energy efficiency and solar, we talked about, comments were about rebates and discounts, and Rachel brought that up as well, and the need to help offset the prices, and then just general also about education about solar and its benefits needed to encourage folks to use it. So give everyone a moment to read. And then Andy, I do see your comment, so we will get that added in as well.
Thank you.
Yep. So Keith?
Oh, I haven't had time to look at all the comments.
Sure.
Has Oro Valley even ever explored anything related to community solar versus individual solar and properties?
I know we have solar at some of our town facilities. I don't know in terms of a community solar project if we've ever done anything. I don't think so.
Well, I'm just wondering if we should encourage them to consider doing that, because then you could potentially have that versus somebody trying to install solar in their home, which can be really expensive. But if you'd have community solar, you could at least get the benefit of it and get a reduced cost of your electricity. So there's lots of projects in the Pacific Northwest, California, so it's very common.
Thank you.
Yep.
Comments about, or further comments about rebates, incentives, working with maybe stores to see if we can get discounts for solar education. Rosa? Oh, and you're muted, Rosa. There you go.
I wanted to mention that if you can't afford solar, like for the whole house, you can do a solar hot water heater, which is, I have a solar hot water heater, and my gas bill is $10. And because most hot water heaters are heated by gas, and mine is heated by glycol, which is it's a chemical that goes up through like tubing that goes up to the roof. And it's like 140 degrees coming off the roof, even on a winter day. And so, and it uses convection and it uses a electric backup, but even that electric backup is way more efficient than the gas. So there's just a whole lot of solar education, I think maybe the town could look into, because there's different ways to cut down on energy costs. And we've had it for a very long time, like 11 years. The tanks are made much more robustly than a regular hot water tank. So it lasts a really long time. And I've only replaced the glycol once. So it's pretty cool. But like I said, I think just general solar education, like different ways to apply solar, like solar landscaping, different things to use solar if you can't afford to do the, because it is pretty cost prohibitive to do a whole house for electric, replacement. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
I do want to let folks know if you're adding comments in the chat, we do download the entire chat at the end of after the meeting. So we'll make sure if we didn't get your comments on here during the meeting, we go back through and add comments. So, Keith.
I just wanted to add on about the last comment about solar education. Sustainable Tucson has an energy committee that will actually go and do audits of your home to help you with energy efficiency. And one of them is the type of hot water heater that Rosa mentioned is one of the things they recommend. So it's a good thing you do, and it's totally free. There's no cost to the owner at all. You just have to go sign up on their website. So I would encourage that, just as an FYI. So
Thank you, Keith. Okay. Our next area is electric vehicles. So it would be looking at how Oro Valley can help private property owners, those who wish to install charging stations. If there's ways to do it. So it looks like the comments under here were having charging stations in commercial areas, shopping centers, and then again, any discounts to help install them. And then also, most of the comments were about allowing charging stations within single family homes, so in the garages. So for instance, Tucson, their new single family homes that they're building there, they have charging stations in the garages. So our building code doesn't have that in there yet, but not that it couldn't. It just doesn't currently. So other thoughts about electric vehicle charging stations? Andy and then Nihar.
Yeah, it seems like an important piece of data to have when trying to reduce the emissions of cars in Oro Valley would be how many of the cars on the roads are residents of Oro Valley and how many are coming in or through just as part of their daily commute. It seems like that might greatly affect the strategy or the actions you might try to take. We must have road censuses that could answer that.
So we do know that we do have a high commute rate. We have about 87% of folks come in to work here, and we have another, I think it's 83% leave. I'll have to check I know they're both in the 80s. I might be mixing up the exact number, but we do have a high amount of commuters in Oro Valley in terms of people leaving and exiting every day. Now those exiting live here, of course, but those coming in, they don't live here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know exactly the number of cars that is, though.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That's interesting.
And then Nihar?
Oh, yeah, I had a question about the allowing people to charge in single family homes. Is there a lot of infrastructure that's required to be added to let people charge their cars in their garage? Because the families that do have electric vehicles, I know, they just use like normal outlets to charge their cars.
I am not sure. Does anybody on the call, if you're familiar, Keith, it looks like you might know some information about that.
I can just tell you that the infrastructure to put it in is very simple. I installed my own circuitry in my own garage to do it, and it was easy. But I've studied under an electrician for years. I know how to do it, but it's not complicated at all. to add it. So,
Did that answer your question, Nihar?
Yeah. Thank you.
yep.
Thank you. Sherry? Oh, and Sherry, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I just had a quick thought on this discussion about charging stations. And I think definitely the Oro Valley needs to plan for that, right? Because the demand is going to grow. But what's the benefit of having a charging station at your home versus having a community one in your HOA or having one at like Oro Valley Marketplace? Is there a better or bigger benefit to have them community-based versus in your home? I'm just curious what other people think about that.
Keith?
I mean, my comment is about that would be people spend most of the time at their home. So having it there is just way more convenient. And you could put a lot more in one area versus just a community-based one would be more restrictive. That's just my thoughts.
Follow-up question, sorry. Are the community-based ones, do they charge for it? Like, can you just go up and plug your car in, or do you have to pay for it?
You have to pay for most of them. There are some that are
Okay.
free. Like even the ones that are over at the offices here in Oro Valley, you have to pay for now.
Okay, yeah. When I worked at Roche, we had them up there, and I don't recall anybody ever paying for them, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, I know that companies that offer them, they're free. Like Raytheon has them for sure, and others around the town have them. So,
All right, thank you.
yep.
Thank you. And then Rose?
I just wondered if the town required businesses to have new businesses coming into town, because I know other communities do in other states. A new business comes into town, they have to have so many charging stations.
Right. We don't right now. We don't prohibit them. They can do it, but it's on if they want to. We don't have a requirement that makes them do it. Okay, so I'm going to move us on. The last couple minutes, some of the other comments we heard, I think we've talked about some of these, but not all of them, is a way to just in general reduce, I think Andy brought this up, carbon emissions, especially is public transportation, making sure traffic flow. I do want this group to know we have a group who just focused on transportation. And they did create some goals, policies, and actions related to increasing stoplight or improving stoplight timing, looking at key intersections for traffic flow, and then also public transportation options. And then the last other comments were about education and events. So again, educating the community, having events, looks like a museum at Steam Pump, to also talk about the history of Oro Valley, and then even Earth Day events. Okay, so any last comments? We have a couple minutes from the folks you want to share. Keith?
Speaking of Earth Day, there's a big Earth Day event happening at the Downtown Children's Museum. I believe it's on the 19th or 20th of April. So if people want to go there, there's going to be a lot of environmental groups there and sustainably focused groups as well. So
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So I do want to bring up, speaking of Earth Day, that is also your next meeting, ironically. So if you can't make the next meeting, I do understand for many of you, you have your own events to go to for that day or conferences. What we'll be doing at the next meeting is beforehand, we'll send out the draft goals, policies, and actions. So we're going to work over the next week to use what you gave us tonight, as well as what we heard last year, to draft those. It will be a first draft, so just keep that in mind. It's our first attempt to capture everything. We'll send that out a week beforehand. If you can't make the meeting, please let us know your comments. You can send them over email. And that will just be your first time to look at them. So we'll be continually just sending out revised goals, policies, and actions throughout this process. But our first ask is we just want everybody to take a look and make sure, did we capture everything? We'll get into more of the wordsmithing and refinement later on. So that will be your next meeting, April 22nd. It's a Tuesday. And that will be our focus of that meeting. After that, we'll go into our water conservation and resources meeting, which start in May. All your meetings are on Tuesday, except for that May 1st one. It's a Thursday, so just keep that in mind. That May 1st one will be just like this one. It'll be our harvesting ideas meeting. And then the follow-up meeting would be May 13th, where we look at draft goals, policies, and action. So I want to thank you all. It is 7:30, and my promise to you is to always start and end on time. I want to thank you all. We got through a lot of areas tonight. And I know we will talk about water conservation even more later on. But I hope you all have a good night, and thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.